your family has been through, but you have, out of an incredible tragedy, done so much for the community, and you are such a role model. So thank you, Mike, for everything you do. Thank you. And good afternoon to everyone here. Thank you to all of the incredible leaders with us today, including my friend, the Governor, Roy Cooper. Where is he? Here with his daughter. Every time I land in North Carolina, I'm just literally coming down the stairs of Air Force Two, I will shout to Roy Cooper, "What number is it, Roy?" And today he shouted 16, which is the number of times I've been in this beautiful state since I've been vice president. Every time. I want to thank your next governor, Attorney General Josh Stein. He's doing incredible work. He's going to be an extraordinary governor. Representatives Adam, Manning, Foushee, and Nickel, thank you all for your support, for your friendship, for your leadership. Chair Thomas of the Wake County Board of Commissioners, thank you for all that you do. And to all the leaders that are here today, including the students and instructors here at Wake Tech North. Thank you. Thank you. So thank you all. So listen, this election, I do strongly believe, is about two very different visions for our nation. One, ours, focused on the future, and the other, focused on the past. We see that contrast clearly in many ways, including when it comes to how we think about the economy. So our country has come a long way since President Biden and I took office. At that time, we sadly remember the millions of Americans that were out of work. We were facing one of the worst economic crises in modern history. And today, by virtually every measure, our economy is the strongest in the world. We have created 16 million new jobs. We've made historic investments in infrastructure, in chips manufacturing, in clean energy. And new numbers this week alone show that inflation is down under 3%. And as President of the United States, it will be my intention to build on the foundation of this progress. Still, we know that many Americans don't yet feel that progress in their daily lives. Costs are still too high. And on a deeper level, for too many people, no matter how much they work, it feels so hard to just be able to get ahead. As president, I will be laser focused on creating opportunities for the middle class that advance their economic security, stability, and dignity. Together, we will build what I call an opportunity economy. An opportunity economy. An economy where everyone can compete and have a real chance to succeed. Everyone, regardless of who they are or where they start, has an opportunity to build wealth for themselves and their children, and where we remove the barriers to opportunity so anyone who wants to start a business or advance their career can access the tools and the resources that are necessary to do so. I will focus on cutting needless bureaucracy and unnecessary regulatory red tape, and encouraging innovative technologies while protecting consumers. and creating a stable business environment with consistent and transparent rules of the road. As president, I will bring together labor with small businesses and major companies to invest in America, to create good jobs, achieve broad-based growth, and ensure that America continues to define the future and lead the world. And key to creating this opportunity economy is building up our middle class. It is essential. The middle class is one of America's greatest strengths. And to protect it, then, we must defend basic principles, such as your salary should be enough to provide you and your family with a good quality of life. Such as no child should have to grow up in poverty. Such as after years of hard work, you should be able to retire with dignity. And you should be able to join a union if you choose. Building up the middle class will be a defining goal of my presidency, because I strongly believe when the middle class is strong, America is strong. So in the weeks to come, I will address in greater detail my plans to build an opportunity economy. And today, I will focus on one element that's on the minds of many Americans as they pay their bills at the kitchen table or walk the aisles of a grocery store. And that is lowering the cost of living. So every day across our nation, families talk about their plans for the future, their ambitions, their aspirations for themselves, for their children. And they talk about how they're going to be able to actually achieve them financially. Because look, the bills add up. Food, rent, gas, back-to-school clothes, prescription medication. After all that, for many families, there's not much left at the end of the month. I grew up in a middle-class household. For most of my childhood, we were renters. My mother saved for well over a decade to buy a home. I was a teenager when that day finally came, and I can remember so well how excited she was. I kind of understood what it meant, but we called her Mommy. Mommy was so excited, it just made us excited that she was so excited. Later in college, I worked at McDonald's to earn spending money. Well, some of the people I worked with were raising families on that paycheck. They worked second or even third jobs to pay rent and buy food. That only gets harder when the cost of living goes up. When I am elected president, I will make it a top priority to bring down costs and increase economic security for all Americans. As president, I will take on the high costs that matter most to most Americans, like the cost of food. We all know that prices went up during the pandemic when the supply chains shut down and failed. But our supply chains have now improved, and prices are still too high. A loaf of bread costs 50% more today than it did before the pandemic. Ground beef is up almost 50%. Many of the big food companies are seeing their highest profits in 2 decades. And while Many grocery chains pass along these savings, others still aren't. Look, I know most businesses are creating jobs, contributing to our economy, and playing by the rules. But some are not, and that's just not right. And we need to take action when that is the case. As Attorney General in California, I went after companies that illegally increased prices, including wholesalers that inflated the price of prescription medication, and companies that conspired with competitors to keep prices of electronics high. I won more than $1 billion for consumers. So believe me, as president, I will go after the bad actors. And I will work to pass the first ever federal ban on price gouging on food. My plan will include new penalties for opportunistic companies that exploit crises and break the rules, and we will support smaller food businesses that are trying to play by the rules and get ahead. We will help the food industry become more competitive because I believe competition is the lifeblood of our economy. More competition means lower prices for you and your families. Now compare what Donald Trump plans to do. He wants to impose what is, in effect, a national sales tax on everyday products and basic necessities that we import from other countries. That will devastate Americans. It will mean higher prices on just about every one of your daily needs. A Trump tax on gas, a Trump tax on food, a Trump tax on clothing, a Trump tax on over-the-counter medication. And you know, economists have done the math. Donald Trump's plan would cost a typical family $3,900 a year. At this moment, when everyday prices are too high, he will make them even higher. As president, I'll take on the issue of the cost of health care. As Attorney General, I took on insurance companies and Big Pharma and got them to lower their prices. And together with President Biden, we've gone even further. We capped the price of insulin at $35 a month, and the total cost of prescription drugs at $2,000 a year for seniors. We let Medicare negotiate lower drug prices for seniors. And just yesterday, we announced that we are lowering the price by up to 80% for 10 more life-saving drugs. And I pledge to continue this progress. I'll lower the cost of insulin and prescription drugs for everyone with your support, not only our seniors. And demand transparency from the middlemen who operate between Big Pharma and the insurance companies who use opaque practices to raise your drug prices and profit off your need for medicine. 2 months ago, I announced that medical debt will no longer be used against your credit score. And I will work as president with states like here in North Carolina, Roy Cooper, thank you again, to cancel medical debt for more and more, millions more Americans. As for Donald Trump, well, he wants to repeal the Affordable Care Act, which 45 million Americans rely on. 45 million Americans rely on it for health care. That would take us back to a time when insurance companies could deny people with pre-existing conditions. We all remember what that was. And we're not going back. We're not going back. We're not going back. And remember, and this is why we're not going back, because we do remember, he tried to cut Medicare every year he was president, threatening a program that tens of millions of seniors count on. And according to his Project 2025 agenda, he intends to undo our work to bring down prescription drugs, the cost of prescription drugs, and insulin costs. Well, we've come too far to let that happen. So we're not going back on that, and let's talk about the cost of housing. So now, the housing market can be complicated, but look, I'm not new to this issue. As State Attorney General, I drafted and helped pass a homeowner Bill of Rights, one of the first in America. And during the foreclosure crisis, I took on the big banks for predatory lending with many of my colleagues, including Roy Cooper, and won $20 billion for California families when I was Attorney General. So I know how to fight for people who are being exploited in the housing market. And I know what home ownership means. It's more than a financial transaction. It's so much more than that. It's more than a house. Home ownership and what that means, it's a symbol of the pride that comes with hard work. It's financial security. It represents what you will be able to do for your children. And sadly, right now, it is out of reach for far too many American families. There's a serious housing shortage. In many places, it's too difficult to build, and it's driving prices up. As president, I will work in partnership with industry to build the housing we need, both to rent and to buy. We will take down barriers and cut red tape, including at the state and local levels. And by the end of my first term, we will end America's housing shortage by building 3 million new homes and rentals that are affordable for the middle class. And we will do that together. We will do that together. And we will make sure those homes actually go to working and middle-class Americans, not just investors. Because, you know, some corporate landlords, some of them, buy dozens, if not hundreds of houses and apartments. Then they turn them around and rent them out at extremely high prices. And it can make it impossible then for regular people to be able to buy or even rent a home. Some corporate landlords collude with each other to set artificially high rental prices. often using algorithms in price-fixing software to do it. It's anti-competitive, and it drives up costs. I will fight for a law that cracks down on these practices. We also know that as the price of housing has gone up, the size of down payments have gone up as well. Even if aspiring homeowners save for years, it often still is not enough. So in addition, while we work on the housing shortage, my administration will provide first-time home buyers with $25,000 to help with the down payment on a new home. We can do this. We can do this. All to help more Americans experience the pride of home ownership and the financial security that it represents and brings. So that's my plan. But here's what Donald Trump would do. If his Project 2025 agenda is put into effect, it will add around $1,200 a year to the typical American mortgage. He's got it backward. We should be doing everything we can to make it more affordable to buy a home, not less. Finally, there's one more way I will help families deal with rising costs, and that's by letting you keep more of your hard-earned money. Under my plan, more than 100 million Americans will get a tax cut, and we will do this by restoring 2 tax cuts designed to help middle-class and working Americans: the Earned Income Tax Credit and the Child Tax Credit. Through which millions of Americans with children got to keep more of their hard-earned income. We know this works and has a direct impact on so many issues, including child poverty. We know it works. So as president, I'll not only restore that tax cut, but expand it. We will provide $6,000 in tax relief to families during the first year of a child's life. Now think what that means. Think what that means. That is a vital, vital year of critical development of a child. And the cost can really add up, especially for young parents who need to buy diapers and clothes and a car seat and so much else. And we will do this while reducing the deficit. Compare my plan with what Donald Trump intends to do. He plans to give billionaires massive tax cuts year after year. And he plans to cut corporate taxes by over $1 trillion. Even as they pull in record profits. And that's on top of the $2 trillion tax cut he already signed into law when he was president, which, by the way, overwhelmingly went to the wealthiest Americans and corporations and exploded the national deficit. You know, I think that if you want to know who someone cares about, look who they fight for. Donald Trump fights for billionaires and large corporations. I will fight to give money back to working and middle-class Americans. So I'll end with this. 2 days ago, Donald Trump was here in North Carolina. He said he was going to talk about the economy. I think you all watched. You know what I'm about to say. But he offered no serious plans to reduce costs for middle-class families. No plan to expand access to housing or health care. And that, actually, I think for most of us, was not surprising. Because we already know his plans. We know the Project 2025 agenda. So there's a choice in this election. Donald Trump's plans to devastate the middle class, punish working people, and make the cost of living go up for millions of Americans. And on the other hand, when I'm elected president, what we'll do, to bring down costs, increase the security and stability financially of your family, and expand opportunity for working and middle-class Americans. So now is the time to chart a new way forward. Now is the time to chart a new way forward, to build to build an America where everyone's work is rewarded and talents are valued, where we work with labor and business to strengthen the American economy, and where everyone has the opportunity not just to get by, but to get ahead. So I thank you, North Carolina. We're going to get this done. And with your help, God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. God bless you.
We have been listening to Vice President Harris speak at an event in Raleigh, North Carolina. Harris says the U.S. economy is by almost every measure the strongest in the world. Harris says she wants to build up a middle class as a defining goal of her presidency if she's elected, and will make it a priority to bring down costs that are still too high. She called for working with companies in the construction of 3 million new homes to be built by the end of her first term that are affordable for working and middle class Americans. If she's here with us, I want to bring in CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes. There you are. You're at the rally, Nancy. Interestingly, Harris acknowledged the cost increases, but she blamed greedflation for some of it. She said some companies are seeing record profits, and she said she'll implement the first ever ban on federal price gouging. What does that mean?
That's a great question, Lindsay. We have been asking the campaign exactly what that means. Does that mean that she's imposing price caps on certain types of groceries, or does that mean that the federal government would only step in if there was a crisis and suddenly prices were to spike abnormally? They haven't filled in the fine print yet, which makes it a little bit difficult to gauge exactly how impactful some of these proposals would be. There's no question that this goes a step further than what President Biden proposed when he was running for office. At the same time, it sounds a lot like something that dozens of states do to prevent not just the food industry, but a whole bunch of industries from artificially raising prices steeply in the face of a crisis.
Nancy, has the campaign filled in the lines with this proposal of building 3 million new homes and rentals that are affordable for the middle class? What would that look like?
Yeah, we've got more details on that. So there are a few different aspects of that plan, a very ambitious plan. One of the proposals is to give first-time home buyers, particularly first-generation Americans, $25,000 to help them with their down payments, a recognition that new homes have simply, become out of reach for so many working Americans. There are also some tax incentives she's proposing to ensure that home builders construct homes that these first-time home buyers can buy. And there's also an effort, which she talked about here today, to prevent big corporate landlords from either buying up masses of property and then artificially raising the rents, or colluding with other corporate landlords to raise those rents all at the same level. So, when it comes to housing, she acknowledged that prices, and it's, has a lot to do with the fact that mortgage rates are so high right now, that housing has really become a major issue for working families, both when it comes to renting and buying.
Nancy, whenever we see a candidate speaking at a podium, I'm always looking at who's behind them. This is one of the first rallies I can think of in which there were several children behind her.
Nancy, I appear to have lost you. I'm not hearing you any longer.
Okay, can you hear me now, Nancy? Do we have Nancy Combs back? Okay. We are going to work on getting Nancy back here to answer a couple more questions. But for now, let's bring in David Wessel. He's a senior fellow in economic studies at Brookings and the director of the Hutchins Center on Fiscal and Monetary Policy. So, David, thanks for being here. You were listening along with us. What stuck out to you the most?
Well, I think a couple of things. One is President Biden always talks as if every American is a worker. His view of the economy is there's workers and there's companies, and workers don't have enough allies on their side, so I'm going to be on their side. Kamala Harris, interestingly, she mentions that she's very much focusing on Americans as consumers. And I think it reflects both a worldview, a more modern worldview than Joe Biden's, but also it sure sounds like this was a focus group speech. We know that people are worried about the price of food. We know they're worried about housing. I'm going to have a little proposal for each of those. I don't understand the price gouging thing. It sounds a bit like too much federal regulation for my taste, and it doesn't quite clear how it's going to work. It's clear that she is backing what has been a very strong antitrust policy of the Biden administration, that is to promote more competition. And on the housing thing, well, that sounds really ambitious. I looked it up while she was talking. So last year, we built 1.4 million new houses and apartment units. And she's proposing to increase that by 3 billion. Does that mean on top of what the 1.5 billion we're going to get every year, or is she just basically taking credit for what was likely to happen anyways? I don't know.
Okay. So more questions there. I want to ask you about something that Harris brought up, and that is the child tax credit. And she was talking about how she's going to help expand that. But also she mentioned Trump's proposed tariffs. And basically said you will end up paying more for all of your groceries anyway. Can you help us understand a little bit more about what Trump has proposed in terms of tariffs coming in from other countries, but also China?
So I think that if an economist were listening to that speech, that part was a part that many economists would agree with. What she's saying is, we do need to subsidize low-wage workers. That's what we do through the Earned Income Tax Credit. And we do need to subsidize families with children. And so that's a clear tax cut because she's proposing things that are not currently in law. Former President Trump is proposing a 10% tariff on everything we import and a 60% tariff on stuff we import from China. He says, oh, the Chinese pay that. But most economists and most academic evidence say it gets passed along to consumers. So she's drawing that contrast, and I think she picked on something that Trump is very vulnerable on, and labeling tariffs as tax increases is not only accurate, but I think it'll play well with the public.
Both campaigns have suggested that they want to eliminate taxes on tips. How would that work economically in ensuring that if that were to happen, which would be very popular, particularly in the state of Nevada, but how are the campaigns saying that they would offset that?
Right. Well, nobody's saying anything about how would it offset anything. One of the things that I think Vice President Harris did by talking about price gouging and and pushing pressure on corporations to lower prices, those are things that don't cost the federal government anything. So we don't widen the deficit. The tip thing, in my opinion, is just clear pandering to people who live in Nevada, which is a swing state. President Trump made a very broad thing, and the Harris campaign teased him by saying all those guys on Wall Street will say they make $2 a year and $10 million in tips. So her proposal is somewhat narrower, it's just service and hospitality workers. But it's not clear to me why a bus driver who makes $20 an hour should pay more in taxes than a waiter who makes $5 an hour and $7 an hour in tips or something. I think it would be very hard to enforce. Probably a lot of people get tips and don't pay taxes on them anyways. My guess is this one isn't going anywhere, but because I think it's a campaign promise to Nevada, and once the election's over, somehow that'll get lost. I could be wrong.
Okay. David Wessel, thanks for joining us.
Welcome.
Former President Trump's running mate, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, stopped in Wisconsin today, where he delivered remarks to the Milwaukee Police Association. The Ohio Republican discussed the importance of policies that supports law enforcement and blamed Harris for backing policies that make their jobs more difficult.
We need a president, Donald J. Trump, who makes their job easier and not harder. We've got to cut out with the anti-law enforcement craziness. We've got to cut out with some of the policies that have come from the Harris administration that make it harder for the police to do their job.
Earlier, we spoke with CBS News campaign reporter Olivia Rinaldi about why Vance picked Milwaukee for today's appearance.
That's critical because that is the union representing Milwaukee police officers. And the important part there is really that the Trump-Vance campaign is focusing on the union vote in those crucial battleground states. So that's Wisconsin.